Good evening, everyone, and welcome to day 8 of our Salesforce platform developer. Tonight, we're going to continue with Apex triggers. So far, we've learned a lot about Apex. We've learned about collections. We've learned about data type. We've learned about constructor. We've learned about methods. We've learned about Soql, how to manipulate data, and the like. So tonight, without wasting much time, let's go into Apex trigger. Okay, so Apex triggers. What are Apex triggers? Let me give you an example. Where are we going with Apex triggers? When you build your workflow, when you go to your workflow, when you're working declaratively, you go to workflow rules. And when you create workflow rules, what are the conditions? The conditions for workflow rules are you select the objects of interest. Once you select the object of interest, you click on next, you give it a rule name, whatever it is, workflow for accounts, okay? Or whatever the name of the workflow you're trying to create. But more importantly, you have to select something here. And that is when an account record is being created, that means the workflow will trigger, okay? When it is created or every time it's edited, that means it's going to trigger. And when it's created, anytime it's edited, subsequently meets criteria, it's going to trigger. So in other words, when you are evaluating the rule criteria, the entry criteria, okay, the evaluation criteria for workflow is based on trigger. This is the declarative way of triggering something in Salesforce, communicating in Salesforce. Programmatically, it is called Apex trigger. So what is Apex trigger? Apex trigger is just a way to communicate or to listen whenever someone creates a record in Salesforce. So anytime someone go and create a new record, you can listen to what that person is doing, and you can manipulate things before the record gets saved into the system. What do I mean? Right now, I want to create an opportunity. I call it an amount, the close date, opportunity name, the type, the stage, and once I click on save, there is a trigger behind the scene that will listen to any time an opportunity is created and is going to do something. Anytime I edit this opportunity and I change the name, there's a trigger behind the scene and that would listen. So what happens between and after? It's what you as a developer want to do. I want to control the value of amounts if this is equal to this. I want to control the value of the close dates if the stage is qualification. That's trigger. That's the use case for trigger. So trigger enables you to perform custom actions before and after events in Salesforce. So whenever you create something or whenever you update something, you can run a trigger behind the scene that would manipulate the data you're collecting or you're sending. So how does it work? Just like you writing Apex classes, you go and you create new and you write Apex trigger. You give it a name. The name is totally up to you, but you just give it a name. So typically, if you're writing Apex trigger on an account object, then you want to probably call it accounts trigger because you want to label it such that anyone that is reading your code would be able to understand that this is a trigger. So how does it look like? The first thing is it starts with trigger. Please don't try to write this yourself like this. Just use the file and create it. Alternatively, you can, if you know how to understand the structure, you can just write it, but you don't need to memorize this. Just go to file and go to trigger and create trigger, and you have this structure. So it starts with trigger. then the name of the trigger, then the objects of the trigger, like what object are you listening to? Okay? Then the events, what has taken place? Why do you need a trigger? So the event that takes that, the trigger events are the things that happened before you save this record, manipulate operation. After you save this record, manipulate something. So that is the trigger event. For instance, before insert. What does that tell me? It tells me that there could be something called before updates. Before you update a record, do something. What else can I do? Anything that has to do with DML, data manipulation, you can run a trigger event. So what are the data manipulation? Create, which is insert. Read, you're not really manipulating data, right? Update, which is to update a record. Then we also have delete. So anytime you think about an instance where a record can be changed in the system, you can run a trigger on that. So now that we have the before trigger, what does that tell me? It tells me that if I can have before, then I can have after. That means whatever I can do before, I can also do after. So we have after insert, after update, after delete. I think we also have after on delete. Okay? After on delete. So what am I trying to tell you? I'm trying to tell you that you can listen to Salesforce action. So, some of you will be having troubles, or you have a project or you have a task at work that says, when something has moved to need analysis, we want something to happen behind the scene on maybe a contact object. Or maybe if we delete a contact, we need to update the account object saying this contact has been deleted. Okay, we're going to see an example of that very soon. However, I'm just trying to give you an ideas. The ideas are, if you try to do anything on Salesforce, you can run a trigger on that object. So whenever there is an action taking place on this object, the trigger will run and it can go and manipulate something else relating to this object. Okay, so now let's do a very simple trigger experience. I want to create a trigger. What object do I want to trigger on? On account objects. And anytime the trigger is created before insert, let me print system.debug. Okay. This is a before trigger on account object. And that's it. So it means that if I run or if I update an account record, I should be able to get, this is a trigger, this is a before trigger on account object. But it doesn't always work like that. Why? Because look at, we have before update, we have before delete, we have before after insert, after update, after delete. How would the trigger know what action specifically you're referring to? How would the trigger know that you want a before action? How would the trigger know that you want before update? Before, how would the trigger know? This is when you now to put what they call the trigger context, meaning that I can now say specifically, instead of running this operation anytime, so if I go and edit this and I just save, instead of running this operation every time an action takes place behind the scene, I want to specifically say, okay, don't do it every time. I want to only do it when it is before insert. I want to only do it when it is before update. And that is what they call the trigger context. The trigger context. context. Okay? Context is where exactly I want this to happen. When do I want it to happen? Okay? So the trigger context will help you differentiate whether it is before or after. Okay? So now, let's quickly take a very simple use case of a trigger and let's practicalize it. I want to run a trigger on an account. And before the account gets created, I want to update the account site if the account site is not present. Okay? I want to be able to do that. How do I do that? The first thing I need to find out is the trigger context. I want to say if the trigger is before and the trigger is insert, then I want to carry out the transaction. For you to find out if a trigger is before, you need to call trigger dot is before. For you to find out if a trigger is after, you call it trigger dot is after. If you want to find out if a trigger is insert, what do? Similar approach, trigger dot is insert. If you want to find out if trigger is update, trigger is update. I'm not making this stuff up. Everything there, everything about trigger is on the Salesforce manual. I told you, right? Anything you want to learn in Salesforce, there's a top documentation for it. I'm giving you what you need to know. What you do with what you need to know is now up to you. Okay, so we have the trigger context, which tells you is insert, is update, is delete, is before, is after. And it tells you what you will get if you are running that contest. Okay? There's more to it. .new, .new map, .old, .old map, .operation type, which we're going to go into later on in tonight's class. This is very powerful. .size. What I want you to kind of like read is this. When you say is insert, it returns true if this trigger was fired due to an insert operation on the object of interest. On the object of interest. Always related to the object of interest. Is update. Returns true if this trigger was fired due to an update operation from Salesforce user interface on the objects of interest. So you cannot just say it will fire because you update campaigns and you want to manipulate leads. No, you have to be interested in that object of interest, like objects specifically. You want to fire on accounts if you want to manipulate account data. Okay, so let's continue. Is after. Returns true if this trigger was fired after all records were saved. Okay, new. Returns a list of the new versions of the S object records. Returns the, like if you try to create an account like this, when you save it, it is called trigger.new. Why? Because you're creating a new version of the account. So it is called trigger.new. It is very powerful. Trigger.old, return a list of an old version of the S object. What does that mean? It means if I have an account and I edit this account, trigger.old will give you the old version of this account. Remember, trigger.new will give you the new version of the account records in a list. Trigger.old will give you the old version before you save that record. So what does that tell you? It means there is a clause for trigger.old. Trigger.old can only happen in an update or delete trigger, because you cannot have an old of an account records if you have not an existing record. So it has to be update and delete. But for new, insert, update, on delete, meaning that once you're updating, you're creating a new version of that record. However, the old version will still exist. Okay? The old version of that record will still exist, but you're creating a new version. Similarly, we have new map, old map. You see where the map comes into place. A map of IDs to new versions of the S objects. A map of IDs to the old version of the S objects. So it tells you that you can manipulate things. You can manipulate data. All you just need is a collection. Collect that data first, then manipulate. That's programming. Everything I've been teaching you is just giving you heads up. This is what you need to know. This is what you need to know. But everything boils down to data type. Programming is about understanding data type, collection, set, list, map. What do you want to collect this data with? Now, once you've collected the data, how do you want to manipulate the data? That's programming. Now, let's say every time I create a record, I want to check if the site is present, if the account site is present. If the account site is not present, I want to give it not available, okay? Or I can check if the rating is present, which is much easier. Check if the rating is present. If the rating is not present, give it a default rating of code, okay? So let's quickly write a simple trigger on the account objects that checks if the rating is present. If it is not present, it gives it a rating of code. Trigger, account trigger on accounts, okay? So what do I want to do? For accounts, okay, you already know this. Trigger.new. What is trigger.new? Trigger.new is the new version of the account record that I am creating. Okay? So this trigger.new contains the new version of the account records that I am creating. And A is one of the accounts. One of the accounts. For accounts, you can call it A, you can call it ACC, doesn't matter. Then you say ACC.rating equals code. But that's not the task we're doing. We want to check if the rating is null. So what do you want to do? ACC.rating is empty. Okay? If ACC.rating is empty, then update the rating to this. That's all we've just done. And you save. Okay? So we haven't done anything in terms of the trigger before, the trigger after. We haven't done all this kind of stuff. Okay? We're just checking whether ACC is empty. You can just say it's null or something like that. You can just use that one, because this is like a fixed, what's it called? A static value, right? Rating is called alt1. It's not like a list. So you cannot call that function on it. So you just say if it is null, if it is empty. Okay? Something like that. Then you say rating is code. That is a trigger that fires. We haven't checked if it is before or after. We just call it, and that's it. So anytime I'm creating a record on account objects, so I can just say account name test rating. I'm going to put it as nothing, okay? But before I do that, let me debug what rating is so I can check. System.debug rating is, so we can look for the right condition, if any at all, okay? Save. So I go and create this. I don't put any value on the rating. I save. Okay, I go to details. Let's check what the rating is. So rating is null, so it's probably needs to be specified. Okay, so you just need to put rating equals null. Okay, because null is like a default default value in Apex. Okay, so it's something that is inbuilt that you can use. So if it is null, then you specify. So when we debug, we find out that rating, if there is no value in there, it's going to be null. Okay, so it's not empty. It's not like there's different between is blank, empty, and null. Okay, so now let's quickly create that again. Go to account, new, and just put anything here. Save. Okay, let's look at the rating again. Code. Okay, so basically we've created a trigger that would automatically update the rating based on what? If it is null. But now we have not restricted our trigger. That means this trigger would fire every time we update, every time we delete, every time whatever is within that context is going to fire. But that's not the purpose of a trigger. You have to streamline when the trigger should fire. You have to narrow it down. I want it only to fire anytime I am creating a new record, or anytime I'm updating a new record, or anytime I'm deleting and the likes. So you cannot just write a trigger and just put it there. It's going to be too much operation on the computer or on the processing ability of the computer. So you want to kind of like limit it to maybe when I'm creating, okay? Or when I am updating. So how do you do that? So right now we have this. You need to now put what they call the trigger context that would ensure that it is before and it is insert. So what does this tell me? It tells me that this should only run if it is before and it is insert. Don't run on updates. Don't run on delete, okay? Let's quickly go to an account. This has nothing, okay? It changes, right? Because the trigger is not looking out for any activities, any contests. Rating, edit, save, code, right? Now, let me save this, okay? Let me save this. It's not going to say, okay, it's before, it's insert. Go to any account again that has no rating, details, no rating, edit, save. Nothing changed because this is after you've already created the record. That means it doesn't care anymore. It doesn't care anymore. But when you're creating the record, it cares. So the context which you want to run the trigger determines when the trigger should run. Okay? So you've seen in less than 30 minutes, you've seen how to turn your workflow rules, your process builder, even your flows into Apex code by just understanding the context of Apex trigger, how to run the Apex trigger, and how to manipulate using the logic. Okay? So what are the use cases of triggers? Like I said, you want to manipulate data. You want to collect old values. You want to manipulate them and create new values. Okay, so let's go into more of how to work with triggers. You've seen how to work with trigger, but there is more to just trigger. Why is there more to trigger? Because trigger means I will be listening to these objects and I'll be doing something on these objects. What does that tell me? It tells me that what if I have 10 triggers on an object? What would happen? What would happen if I have 10 triggers on an object? Then, based on best practice, Salesforce is telling you that anytime you have a trigger, make sure that you only have trigger on one object. Only have a trigger on one, only have one trigger on an object, and you can now start manipulating things. What does that mean? You need to have your logic written such that if trigger is before, else you can say else if trigger dot is after. Meaning that you don't need to create a lot of trigger files because you want to do any trigger. All this is all you need. So in your is before, you can now say if trigger dot is insert, else if trigger dot is update, else if trigger is delete. So what does this tell me? It tells me that whatever trigger I want to run on the account objects, all I just need to do is have this structure in place. And I can just be calling that trigger whenever I want to. I can just be calling the trigger whenever I want to. That means I'm not going to be writing another trigger and be writing is before and is insert, is before and is update on another file. No, this structure alone is enough for me to run a trigger. So it's after. What do you need? It's after insert, it's after update, it's after delete. So what does this tell me? It tells me that I have put a very rigid structure in place, and this is all I need in order to run my code. So now, let me show you what is going on. If it is before insert, is before is insert, the code will fall here. This is where your before insert code should fall into. If it is before an update, before update, this is where your before update should fall into. If it is before and delete, this is where your before delete code should fall into. So what does that tell me? It tells me that anything I want to do on the account object, I can do it with just one file. And I can write my logic in such a way that it will position my code into the box where I want it to be. So I don't need to worry what happens when I create a new record. When I create a new record, I will look for where the record should stay, and I'll go and write that code in there. Okay, so having this at the back of your mind, you're starting to write scalable code. What do I mean by scalable code? Code that can be reused by other people, code that can be understood by other people. Then you are writing such code. Okay? So now I have given you a very good structure on where to put your code whenever you want to manipulate things. You want to manipulate things, where do you put your code? This is where you put your code. Okay? If I want to look through this after delete, where am I going after delete? Put my code here. But remember, you need to put all these trigger events into the bracket. Otherwise, your trigger would not fire. It will not be listening to this. So you need to put this, and you need to put your code where it should be. Okay? So you don't run trigger on all the codes. You only run it where it should fire. It looks easy now. But if I ask you to do stuff, it might seem a bit hard. But if you take your time to understand what I've just done right now, you realize that it is not hard. We have a workflow rule previously. We select the objects and we define a criteria when it's created and edited. Same with trigger. We define the objects. This is just a name. I can call it anything. Account name trigger. I can call it anything. Doesn't matter. It's just a name. Okay? But make sure that the name is matching the title of your file. That's all. Okay? So now we've seen a very simple case of building trigger. But what usually happens is this. When you build trigger, you will now see a bunch of codes. You'll see a bunch of codes here, which is not too appealing. Because imagine I have a delete operation. I put the code here, some delete code. And it grows infinitely for about 500 lines, or obviously that's ambitious. Like 10 lines. This one has 10 lines. One file will now have about 500 lines of code. That is not best practice when you are developing an application. You want to let your code be readable. You want people to be able to understand your code. And how does that work? With trigger, you have to use what they call trigger handler class. A trigger handler class would ensure that you can improve your logic and take it elsewhere. So you don't put it within the trigger class. You take it into a different class. And how do you achieve that? You achieve that by creating a simple class. And you can just call it accounts trigger handler. So in programming world, the account trigger handler is just a class that I taught you guys previously in Apex. For instance, you can have the class as public, meaning that within this application and namespace, any code that wants to make use of account trigger handler would be able to call it. Then what can you do within account trigger handler? You can create what they call a method. You can create what they call a method. And what kind of method can you create? Any method that you want to call. So the method you're calling is that delete operation. The method you're calling is that update operation. The method you're calling is that insert operation. Do you get what I mean? It's that operation that you don't want to put here. You want to put it in a different class and call that class. Okay? So now, it's delete. What do I want to call after delete? So I want to maybe create a class called public void, and after delete, the logic for after delete here. Say, I have created a simple class which is after delete in my account trigger handler. So what does that mean? It means that I can be here and say account trigger handler dot after delete do something. So I am calling account trigger handler and account trigger handler as what? After delete. And I am calling it in my trigger. But what happens before you call any class? What happens before you call any class? Before you call any class, you have to declare that class. So what you need to do is declare account handler, okay, equals, okay, you want to declare the instance of that class, okay? That's the only way you can call it, unless it's a static method, then you don't need to declare it. But if it's not static, you have to declare it, okay? So now, what I've just done is I have created a class that will take my code, and within my trigger, I have called that class instead of putting all my code here. So let me tell you in theory what we've just done, okay? This is what we've done. I said, don't even let us say after delete. Let's say I want in a before insert. Okay? For accounts inside trigger.new. Okay? And I want to check the rating. Okay? If the rating is null, this is the code we wrote the other time, okay? If ACC.rating is null, ACC.rating equals code. So we still have the same function, right? And it should still work, okay? I put rating as null, save. Rating is code. It's still working. What I'm doing, what I have just done is, okay, I don't want, what if I want to write another logic? For instance, I want to say another logic to be for account.new, if rating is code, do this. I want to also check another thing. Maybe if, what else can I check? If industry, if annual revenue is less than 100, do something, okay? If dot annual revenue is less than $100, I want to say annual revenue. What can I manipulate? I want to say, what can I put in active states? Or type is prospects, okay? Dot type equals prospects. Okay, so now, as you can see, it's growing. That logic is growing. It's growing, right? So because every developer in that organization, that enterprise, will be working on just one file, it becomes really hard to understand your code because you are now going to be writing on one file and the logic will now keep growing. So you can just take all this away from here. You take it off, you go to your handler and you put it in your handler. You put it in your handler. That is the purpose of the trigger handler. It takes away the code from where it used to be, take it to a different class, and now you can call that class. But before you call that class, what do you need to do? You need to create a method. You need to create a method. So the method will be, instead of after delete, you can call it before insert. Okay? Before insert, what do you need? You need trigger.new. You need trigger.new. If you go to before insert, system.debug, what type of data is trigger.new? A trigger.new is a list. Okay? A trigger.new is a list. But let's find out. Okay? Let's find out. For instance, this one, let's just comment this out so we can run our code. Okay? So our code will compile. Save this, go to trigger.handler, save this. Okay? So I want to find out the data type of trigger.new. Okay? So I will just what type of data is trigger.new? This is a list. You already got used to a list, right? A list is something that you can find out the first record, the second record, and the likes, okay? So if you going by that, we have system.debug, trigger.new is a list, okay? Is a list collection. So what does that mean? It means that if I want to pass trigger.new into a method, what type of data type would I pass? I want to pass, or I'm expecting it to have a list, okay? I'm expecting to have account list because the input should be account list. Okay, so this is perfect. Account list should be list, account list, because this is how to declare a list of accounts. This is just a name I made up. It could be anything, okay? It could be anything as long as it is a type of account. Doesn't matter. It's a list. And if you're writing program, always use the right name to make sure that it makes sense, right? Account list. That means before insert is expecting an input called account list, which is a list of an account. So if I go back to my trigger, this method before insert account trigger handler, which is the instance, okay? Instance of account trigger before insert, present. What is it expecting? Trigger.new, because it is a list. That's it. I'll walk you through this again. Let me walk you through this again. Okay, so what have I done? Let me walk you through. Don't get overwhelmed by this. This is very straightforward. Don't get overwhelmed. Ignore everything that is here. Let's focus solely on this. Previously, comment this out, okay? I've been asked to listen to the account objects. When we create a new record in the account objects, it is called trigger.new context. And it is, before you save it, it is called before. Because you're creating a new record, it is called insert. So that context is called before insert. So for me to create a trigger, I need to declare, don't even listen to this, you can take this off. For me to create a trigger, I need to put a trigger event called before insert. Okay? Now that I put a trigger called before insert, I need to put my code. Let's forget everything down there. This is my code. Okay? My code wants a list of accounts that is coming into the before insert. What is that list of accounts? According to Salesforce, it is trigger.new. Returns a list of the new versions of the S object, Salesforce object records that you're creating. Now, trigger.new. You know from your control statements, if you look through a list of any record, you will get one record of that list. You will get one record. So if you look through a list of accounts, you will get one account every time you're looping through. Every time you're looping through, you're going to get one account. It doesn't matter whether it's one record you're creating. This is what they call bulkify, right? It doesn't matter whatever it's one record you're creating. In reality, you'll be inserting a lot of records at a time. So you're going to loop through that record and you will get one account from that record. So now I'm checking one account. I'm looking for the rating. Is it null? If the rating is null, change it to cold. I'm checking again. Is the annual revenue less than 100? If the annual revenue is less than 100, change the type to prospect. That is all I've been asked to do. Now, the question is this. This trigger, according to Salesforce, they're telling us that the best practice is for you to have just one trigger on an account. Don't create another file again and call it account trigger 2, account trigger 3, account trigger 4. It is not the best practice. The best practice is to have only one trigger per object. Okay, so now I have this code. If another developer comes in 3 months' time, they want to update or they want to do another trigger, they want to solve another business challenge, they will create another code and the code will keep growing. The code will keep growing. This doesn't make sense when it comes to programming. You need to improve your code. Don't put logic and coding and don't make it confusing for developers that will come and take over from you. You want them to understand it. So now Salesforce is saying, or I am telling you that instead of you putting a code and let it run for before insert, run for after insert, after delete, you don't need to run the code for every context. You need to be more specific. You need to be more specific. That is where you define before updates, before deletes, after inserts, after updates, and after deletes. That means this code will be listening to all these instances. After listening to that, then the code will now say, okay, should I run this for every time it is before delete, before update, before? Should I do that? But he said, no, I don't want you to do that for every time. This is only for when we're creating an account. The first time when we're creating an account. Then you now use what they call the context. The context is streamlining, narrowing down the situation to where you actually need this code. I don't want this code to run every time for these trigger events. I want it to run only when I want to insert a new record. I want it to run when I want to insert a new record, and that's it. I want to insert a new record. That means even though I have declared all these trigger events, it will not run only when we want to insert a new record. That's when it's going to check and it's going to run. Okay? So now, it is still going to run, which is a good thing. But that doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't solve the problem of what we're trying to prevent. Remember, what we're trying to prevent is another developer that is new into the company organization should know where to go and insert their code so that they wouldn't have to read a bunch of codes before they make their own changes. So we created a new class called Account Trigger Handler. Account Trigger Handler is where we place our code. We place our code here because we can easily call this file inside here. How do we call it? The first thing we need to do is declare the instance of that handler, just like any other thing we do in Salesforce, Apex. Declare the instance. Now that you've declared the instance, you want to call it, right? What did you declare the instance? Account handler. Let's grab it, account handler. What is the method that we're interested in account handler? The before insert. What type of data do we need to use in the before insert? The type of data is account list. What is account list? Account list is the record that is coming in the trigger.new context. So we pass it into our before insert. That's all we've done. We've just improved our code. We haven't solved anything differently. We've only improved the code such that any new person coming into the organization would understand our code and will be able to use our code. So I use before insert here. You can call it anything. It's only that it makes sense if you use something that would make sense, right? You can call it anything and you can call it anything here. So it's all up to you what you want to call it. As long as you know what you're doing, naming doesn't matter in Apex. It's about what you are collecting, the data type you're collecting. That data type will now determine what you can do programmatically. For loop, if else, it's data type. I taught you data type, I taught you collection. You see how everything is coming together. Everything is coming together. Okay? So remember, before insert is just something made up. Then you can put it here. Okay? So now let's take a pause and find out if you guys get this before we go into something more interesting. Okay? Please raise your hand if you want to ask questions so I can call you according to how your hands are being raised. Okay? Thanks. Ola, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Hi, Babatope. Good evening. I want to ask about the insert, update, and delete. From the workflow rule, we know that we can create a workflow rule. When we are creating, we can use the trigger using workflow rule terminology after creation and after update. So I wonder if for the trigger, we have something like upsert. Or delete before or after upsert, something like that.
So the triggers you have is this, okay? This is a trigger we have. This is trigger events, okay? So according to Salesforce, so if you want to upsert, it has to be a DML. What does that mean? As you can see, when I ran the trigger, I did not do any DML. Do you know why? Any record you create must save now. It must save. What you're doing is you're manipulating before it saves. You're manipulating that records. That's what trigger is all about. Manipulation of data before it saves. That means you cannot save a data that is already going to be saved. Trigger is just manipulating that data. And you don't look at, if I say insert ACC, yeah. Let's test it and see. I think you get an error. You get an error, okay? Let's go to account. Make sure that you save this, okay? You go to new. And can you see? You get an error. Before insert caused by DML, statement cannot operate on trigger new or trigger old. That means you cannot save a record that is bound to be saved anyway. Do you get what I mean? So you don't want to run the DML in the trigger.new or trigger.old because it's going to be saved. Okay?
Okay.
And carry on, please.
My second question is, with DML, we know we can bulkify, but with trigger, using the loop, I'm trying to wrap my head around the logic with the, bulkifying of trigger. It's supposed to be triggering per record. So I want to kind of understand how that bulkification would work for the trigger.
Okay. Let me give you a very good example of how to bulkify a trigger. Okay? Pay attention. But before I continue, I want to find out if everyone else is okay before we treat bulkification. Okay? Everyone is good? Now, let's do something more interesting. I have a trigger on account, or let me just kind of like take everything out because we now get it. Okay? So I'm just going to mute you all out. Okay? 1 minute. I want to be able to do this. What do I want to do? I want to create a new account and I want to maybe add an opportunity for each account I'm creating. Okay? I want to add an opportunity for each account I'm creating. Something like that, because at the end of the day, bulkification means that you're not just processing one record, you're processing multiple records. What does that mean? Let's say, for instance, you have let's say trigger.new. Trigger.new is one record here. But in reality, trigger.new could be a list. Okay? So you want to look through that list and you want to bulkify the list. Actually, don't even let me do something complex. Let me do something very basic. You know that for accounts in trigger.new, okay, you want to change the rating. This is what bulkify means. If rating is null, you want the rating to be cold. Now, you're doing this for all the accounts, okay? You're doing this for all the accounts. But if you come here right now, let's say we're going to be running a DML statement. If you come here right now, okay? If you come here, what would you do? You now say upsat or updates. Update what? ACC, which is perfect. But number one, you've made Salesforce blunder. Salesforce says, do not update in a for loop. What does that mean? It means that this stuff will run, update, then go again and run, update, goes and run, update, which is going to update every time you have a condition that matches what you're looking for. But the thing you want to do when it comes to programming, especially Salesforce, is you want to bulkify. That means you want to declare all the instances accounts to be updated. Meaning, I don't want to update all the time. I only want to update when I am done. Okay? So, instead of running updates here, I'm just going to add my account to a list of accounts that is outside of this for loop. Okay? The list of accounts is outside of this for loop. That means I'm creating a new account. Every time I run this for loop, instead of updating, I took it out and I'm now adding it to a new list. That account is now inside this list. After that, I run my updates. That's it. So instead of you updating every time here, you have minimized the amount of transactions. So if the account list is 150, you're going to be updating 150 times. Here, you're only going to be updating one time. That is bulkification of your code, meaning that you've put all the code inside one list instead of having to update all the time. Okay? So does that make sense to you, Ola?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you. I just didn't realize that with trigger, we could use DML also.
Yes. Okay. So if it's trigger.old and new, you cannot use DML, okay? Because it's going to eventually update or save. Okay. So you can run DML outside of the scope of the trigger, but if it's trigger.new and old, it will save or update. So you don't need to do that. But you can still run delete. You can still run all those kind of stuff. Okay. So that is the basis of trigger. The only thing you probably need to know from now on is advanced trigger. What are the use cases of trigger? I want to be able to say, okay, let me bulkify, let me do stuff. Okay, let me show you another example of trigger. Maybe that would let you understand better. Let's say you have this, you have a trigger like this, and you're on account. Okay, let me mute you because I don't want background noise. On account. Okay. Account A and trigger.new. Remember, sometimes I write it new like this, sometimes I write it new like this. It's case insensitive, doesn't care. Okay. So now for accounts, trigger.new, and what do I want to do? I want to find out if this account has opportunity, or I want to find out all the opportunities in this account. What do? I create opportunity, okay? Opportunity, list, okay? Equals to a query what else? From opportunity. Okay, where account ID is what? Account ID is what? The account. Okay? Okay? The accounts. So what do I want to do? What do I want to do? I might want to do something, which is fine. So I can now say for opportunity in opportunity list, what do I want to do? Update something, right? So what am I saying? I'm saying go to all the accounts, look for the one with opportunity, like this one, for instance. Then update the stage. Update the stage from close one to anything. So what do I want to do here? I can now say for opportunity in this, go to if opportunity dot stage name is not null. Okay? Then what do I want to do? Then update the opportunity stage name to close one. You know, I'm just kind of like giving hypothetical situation, right? This is a bad code. Do you know why it's a bad code? It's a bad code because I've told you several times in Salesforce, do not query in a for loop. If you query in a for loop, you'll be querying for every transaction. You guys need to get this by fire. You'll be querying in every transaction, meaning that it will say, okay, transaction 1, select ID opportunity. If it is stage name, it's going to check all the opportunity and update the stage name. Goes back again, item number 2, query the same thing and check. Goes back again, item number 3, query the same thing and check. As you can see, this is not good programming. You can replace this by just writing the same code like this. So remember, our goal is to not put query and to not put for loop inside a for loop, okay? So I don't want these two things in a for loop. I want to take it out. How can I take it out? The first thing I need to do is, why not just get all the accounts with opportunity? Get me all the accounts with opportunity. Accounts with opportunities. From your Soql knowledge, how do you do subqueries? Select ID, name from opportunities. Because you know, account and opportunities are related from accounts. Okay? Where ID is in trigger.new. That's it. That's it. You've queried these two things by just one query. So now that you have accounts with opportunities, what do you do with accounts with opportunities? For accounts with opportunities, what do you need to do? Opportunity, which is a list related to accounts, equals what? Equals the accounts that we get here. This account dot opportunities. So we've been able to get the account with opportunities, and we've seen the related account of opportunities. So what do we want to do with it? We want to do something with it. So related account is this, and you can just say, okay, dots, or because this is a list, you can just say, obviously, you don't want to do this, but you can just say dots stage name equals close one. Can you see? But better still, you don't want to, obviously, you want to loop, right? You want to loop, but you don't want to be calling this query all the time. Can you see how we've minimized the number of queries we have to call? Because right now, this is a list, this is another list, then you're looping through a list. But right now, you've directly impacted or you've directly made changes to the opportunities without looping through a list. You just grab this outside of the loop. So the for loop is now just one. And if at all you want to loop through this, you can use for loop again. Okay, you can use for loop, but now it's going to be just opportunity. Okay, related to accounts. But remember, do not do any transaction. Do not do any transaction. So by not doing transaction, you want to opportunity. Okay, you want to create opportunity, then just say opportunity to be updated equals new list of opportunity to be updated, right? Then remember, just add that opportunity here, which is OPP. OPP. Then outside of this loop, then you can now say update opportunity to be updated. Okay, you've cleaned or you've written a better code by just moving things around. Okay, so remember, you can call directly trigger.new in your where clause. This will automatically get the ID, and it will just use that ID of the account you are querying because you are on the account objects. Okay, so I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to find out if this makes sense because this is what you will face at work. It's not going to be other than this. It's not going to be other than this. Okay, so I want to find out if this makes sense. Again, I'm opening the floor for questions before we move into something else. I want to find out if this makes sense. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and let's walk through it. Okay, let's walk through it together. Do you guys have any question? Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Do you guys have any questions? Is this odd? I just want to have a feeling. Is this odd? Does it make sense? Do you guys have any questions? Okay. Again, let's kind of like go through what we've learned so far. We have the workflow rules, and the workflow rule says before updates, before inserts, creates, before after creates. The same thing we have for trigger. Trigger is before inserts, before updates. So if it's after creation, then it's going to be after inserts, after updates. So what is the difference between after inserts and before inserts? Before inserts, you don't have the ID of that record because you have not created that record. You don't have the ID of that record. However, after inserts, you have the ID of the record. That means you can now say, okay, I have created accounts. Can I create opportunity after creating an account? Yes, I can, because I now have the ID of that account. And you know that in opportunity objects, you have what they call the account ID. So after insert, what can you do? You can create opportunity for a related account. But before insert, you cannot create that opportunity. Okay? So you need to understand the instances and why you want to do certain things, because that thing will now help you to determine whether it is possible or not. Okay? So let's go into some context variable again and see some sample, or let's walk through some code. Okay? Let me look into this. Also, try to read this documentation. It will help you when you're designing your solution, because your solution is pretty much what you can learn from this. There is nothing more to Salesforce Apex Trigger than what we've seen here. Okay, so I think we should see an example of a map. But before we look into that, I want to look into something more interesting. Let me see. Okay, let's create a scenario. Let me see an example of a trigger we can create. Let's say we want to find accounts after updates. We want to find all related opportunity, okay, for an account, okay? And after that, we want to check for condition within that related opportunity, and we want to update, okay? So for an edge emergency generator, we have, where is it related? Go back. This is this account, okay? Edge communication. It has 4 opportunities. So we can check if the size of opportunity in an account is greater than 3. Okay? If the size of opportunity in an account is greater than 3, update all the names in that opportunity to have updated name. Okay? It's just a random stuff. Now, what do I need to do? First of all, I need to create a trigger. And my trigger should be after. Okay? After updating an account, I want to find out all the related opportunities. And based on that, I want to be able to update the names of those opportunities. The names of those opportunities. So let's start. First, I do my trigger, which is fine. Then trigger dot is after. Remember, you should use the structure I gave you. Don't use this, okay? Just use the structure I gave you, because the structure I gave you is much, much comprehensive than this. But this is just for us to address the situation, okay? The structure I gave you was trigger dot is before, okay? Then else, trigger dot is after, okay? Whereby you address everything. But obviously, you can just quickly use this just to, if you look at trigger, let's go back to trigger again, trigger context. Okay, so this is what I'm telling you, right? You do all your if before, then you do all your if after, okay? Because it's much easier to manage your trigger that way. Okay, so now I go to trigger is after and trigger is update. Then what do I want to do? I want to find all opportunities for the accounts, okay? And how do I do that? What will be my list? List of opportunity. Okay, list of opportunity. And this is list of related opportunities, okay? Always try to be descriptive with your name, or just follow your organization convention, okay? Because some organization would have approaches on how to write names, okay? So now we have this, and what do I want to get from this? I want to query, okay? Select ID name from opportunity. Okay, so now I've selected ID name for opportunity, but that doesn't give us, because we are in an account and we have what? The account ID. So what we want to do is we want to check where the account ID, okay, is in. Remember, this is your Soql, trigger.new. Okay, that is it. Now we have found all the, look at this query. If I duplicate this and I go to my Salesforce inspection, look at this is account, right? This is the ID of that account. It gave me all the opportunities in that account. These are the opportunities, the 4 opportunities in that account. So now, the difference between equal to is with equal to, you're specific on the ID. Within, you are more general, more broad. You're just saying where account ID is in, because this is a list. What is a list? A list is this, like what you get from a list, get from a list. To get one item, one element from this list, this is to get one element from this list. So you cannot say equal to, because this is a list. And for you to say equal to, you need to be getting just one element from that trigger.new. So you cannot say it is equal to, you have to say in, because in will now be looking through a list instead of getting one list, one item, okay? So that's why we're using in, not equal to, okay? So now that we've gotten list of related opportunities for that account, let's go further. What do we want to do? We want to loop through this list. I want to loop through this list for one opportunity. I've said this several times and I'll say it again. One opportunity in fact, let's make it this way. One opportunity inside the list of related opportunities. What do I want to do? What do I want to do? I want to manipulate the name. But before I do that, I told you that I want to also check for the size. If you want to check for the size, you can just say .size. And you can say if size is greater than 3, then you can do something, right? So whatever you're given, you can interpret it into logic. It's not hard. You just need to be able to interpret whatever you've been given into logic. Okay, so I'm checking for opportunity, for one opportunity in the list of rated opportunities. I want to change the name. This is going to change all the name, but I don't want to change all the name. I want to find a condition. Okay, so let's create a condition in this and look for that condition. Okay, account number is a good candidate. Then I'll say if, okay, if the opportunity, which is this one opportunity dot, but account number is not on the opportunity, is on the account, and we haven't queried that. So we need to be looking into the account object, or we need to be looking to something that is related to opportunity. So for instance, I can go to opportunity and say, okay, because I have a generator and this is the account name, okay? But I know that the account name is present in the opportunity. So I can say, okay, this is okay. I can get the account name from the opportunity. So what I can say is one opportunity dot account, the name equal to, no, it's meant to be what? Account number, okay? Account number. Then you do something for that account, okay? So if it is, it has to be Boolean, right? Because you cannot pass in a value in an if condition. If condition would always be checking for a Boolean, true or false. If it is true, do this. If it is false, do this. Okay? So now I'm checking specifically if that opportunity has an account number of this. I want to update the, what do I want to update? I want to update, what can I find in opportunity? Go to opportunity and just look for something interesting you want to update. Just update something to see that your stuff is working, okay? So I want to maybe change the type. Okay, change the type to existing customer upgrade, existing customer downgrade. Then change the type. Remember, when you have a pick list, you have to be very specific, okay? Now, we've created an instance and we have manipulated. What else do we want to do? According to bulkification of code, what do we want to do? We want to create opportunity. To be updated. Opportunity to be updated, which is a new list of opportunity, right? So opportunity to be updated would now be the list that we're adding one opportunity to. So we don't have to update immediately. After all our for loop and everything, what do? We update opportunity to be updated. But if you want to even make it interesting, you want to, first of all, check if opportunity to be updated, because you don't want to update an empty list, right? If the size is greater than 0, if the size is not empty, if the size is not empty, then update the opportunity. This is how to just write very simple check. So next time you're asked at work, every time you create a new account, go through, or every time you update a new account, go through the related list of the account, or the related opportunities of the account, and check where the account number is this, and change the type to this, then update that list. This is trigger. This is after updates. That's all. We've just literally solved the problem. But guess what? To improve this, you take all this code. You take all this code here, okay? And you take it to the accounts trigger handler. But before that, just create a method. Check all opportunities. Check all opportunities. That's the method. You put the code in there. What does all opportunities, what does it require? Out of everything in this code, in this code, which one is required before you can run this code? The only thing that is required is this trigger new. We don't know what trigger new is. And trigger new is a list of accounts. So turn it into account list. But that account list will be coming from here. Okay? So you have that account list, which is a foreign, or which is something that you don't know. You're passing into the inputs, which is fine. Then whenever you're calling check all opportunities in your trigger, what do you want to do? Check all opportunities, what does it require? Trigger.new. But remember, you have to instantiate the account trigger handler. So account trigger handler. Okay. Then you call it. That's it. Okay, that's it. So you've moved the code from the account trigger into the handler, and you've cleaned up your code. Just the same way we've been doing, just solving questions. Okay? So I'd like to find out again, do you guys understand this? Does this make sense to you? Does this make sense to you? Because this is just Apex. This is just trigger. The only thing that you would do now going forward is how to understand more of this context. Look at, I've only taught you this thing today. Tomorrow we're going to be using map. So I've only taught you new. New is the record you're creating, but there is what they call old. Old is the record that exists before. So let me show you the difference. Then we end this session. Trigger.new, trigger.old. Okay, so we have trigger.new and trigger.old. Okay, let's go to the accounts handler. It says check all opportunities, list of accounts. I'll just call it old accounts lists. No, new accounts list. Okay, why do I call it new account list? In my handler, I say trigger.new. So it is new account list. I'm passing it to stuff. What is the second stuff I'm passing? Trigger.old. Then It is list accounts, old accounts list. Now, the old account list is the old records before you update the account. This is the old account list. The information here is the old account list. The new account list is the updates you're making. So if you change this to something else, then the old account list would have null as the account site. Then the new account list would have something as the account site. The old account list is warm. The new account list is the information you just put. So let's quickly debug that and see what happens, okay? I save this. Variable does not exist account list. Just put it here. That's fine, okay? So now I want to, first of all, I want to loop through just to find what old account list for rating is and new account list for rating is, okay? For accounts coming in, for accounts in old account list, new accounts, okay? Let's see the new account first. System.debug, okay? New accounts rating value. What is it? New accounts dot rating, meaning that I'm grabbing the new account dot rating. Similarly, I want to find out what is in the old account. So this is for you to manipulate, for you to use. I'm just writing it like literally very basic because I want to understand it. Normally, you can use map to find old and new, okay? So you don't have to do this like this. You don't have to loop once, loop twice. You can just loop with just a map, okay? So now I have this, and let's say this is the old account list looping, and this is a new account list looping. Okay, what does it say? Extra that, so just put plus here, okay? Then you put plus here, okay? So now you've done this. So now let's go into this, okay? I save. Previously, we have one. I change it to auth, save. On lines, before update on line 7, method does not exist, okay? You need to save this, okay? Then save. What again? Without querying the requested field, okay? You need to query the requested field, okay? So what is the requested field? The requested field is the account ID and account dot account number, because we're using this stuff. That's why it's telling us we're checking, but we're not querying the value. So you need to query before you can use it. Okay? That's it. Now, let's go and check our logs and see the new account rating value is auth. The old account rating value is 1. Can you see the purpose and the benefit of trigger.new and trigger.old? Trigger.old gives you the old records before changes are being made. Trigger.new gives you the new record after the changes have been made. This stuff, it seems easy right now. Trust me, it is easy. You just need to know how to read Salesforce manual. Anytime I teach you stuff, I'm only teaching you the basics of Apex Trigger. If I teach you what I know in Apex Trigger, we're not going to end this class and you guys will just kind of like feel overwhelmed. But these are the basics you need to know as an entry-level developer. It's now your responsibility after tonight's class to go and read this item one after the other. You can spend a whole day just to understand any tutorial you see online, anyone teaching you Apex Trigger. This is where they get their information from. So why can't you read from the Bible, the source? Whatever they want to teach you is here. I'm only here to explain everything to you. Everything I've taught you tonight is here. You just need to read it. You need to make efforts. Because once you get the job, this is what you'll be doing on the job. If you want to become an architect, it's a different thing. You just need to understand. You need to understand that, okay, we need to use before trigger there. We need to use after trigger there. We need to design it this way. That's fine. But if you want to become a developer, you need to do this. You need to know it because this is your bread and butter. This is what you're going to be doing at the job. I can show you codes I've written at work. They're not more than this. The only difference is logic. How are you thinking? How are you solving the problem? Can you write your problem down before you start coding? That's what makes you a good developer. You just need to understand the syntax. The syntax is, I know about 7 programming languages. Everything is just syntax. JavaScript, Python, Apex, syntax. Just know the syntax and put your brain to it, then you're done. Okay? So I wouldn't overwhelm with any new information. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with trigger, but with more use cases like the map, the sets, with some example of how it's being used. Then we finish up. Then we go into experience cloud. We go into test cases for Apex. We go into Visual Force page. We go into Lightning Web Component. We still have a lot to learn, but we have to do it slowly. I don't want to overwhelm you. I want you guys to know it in and out. So when you go on the job or when I recommend you for jobs, you will feel confident about what you've learned. Or you can even go back and check the videos. Whenever you have questions around this area at work, go and check the video to understand and get better understanding. That's the whole purpose. I don't think I'll be teaching this tomorrow. I don't think I'll be teaching this next cohort. But while I'm still teaching it, you guys should appreciate it and ask questions. That would make me teach more. Otherwise, I'll just think maybe I'm overwhelming you with stuff and I'll just limit the amount of information I give to you guys. Okay? I think that's all for me. Do you guys have any question before we close for tonight? Any question before we close for tonight? Okay, I do hope that everyone submitted their project. It's very important you do because obviously, I told you guys the best student will be taking for internship, paid work experience and stuff like that. So if you're not submitting your project, obviously, you know that you're not a good candidate for that, right? So please try as much as possible to submit your projects. And again, you cannot have a platform developer certification if you don't submit your project. So I'm only going to be selecting a few people to do the platform developer certification. I don't like going forward, like I said, the training will be a bit harder in the sense that you wouldn't just get certification because you attend a training. You get certification because you're doing your projects, you're doing your trailheads, you're doing your points. There's no way you would tell me you have 3 certifications and you have less than 20,000 points on Trailhead. It's an abomination to Salesforce. It shouldn't be heard of. For me to get 100 badges in Salesforce, I spent hours doing my Trailhead. So the training is not a substitute for Trailhead. You have to do your Trailhead. That's the official training material from Salesforce. Then Black Force training will supplement it and help you do well in your certification exam. But for you to ignore Trailhead and say you want to do Black Force only, it's not going to work. And people are looking, including Salesforce, anytime you go for recruitment, they ask you, show me your Trailhead profile. It's impossible for you to have 3 certifications without 20,000 points on Trailhead. It's almost impossible. You need to be doing something different. So I'm trying to make sure that we're not just here for certification, but to understand the Salesforce and hopefully you represent Black Force wherever you go, and I'll be proud of it. Okay? So please try to understand that. I'm not trying to make it difficult for you as such, but I'm trying to maintain the reputation. I'm trying to make sure that anytime people hear about Black Force, or anytime people recommend Black Force students, they know that they've gone through some intensive training before they achieve whatever they achieve. Okay? So please don't feel, don't make it feel like I'm being mean, but I'm just trying to make sure that the brand we are creating is the brand you can be associated with and be proud of. And if you're proud of it, then it makes my life easier. I wouldn't have to worry or stress myself. Okay? So I just wanted to tell you about one thing you probably would have seen, maybe not pay attention to, is the training schedule. So when you log into the training schedule, we've introduced something called announcements. So there is no way you'll come into Black Force and not see announcements pointing at you. So announcement is whatever it is that is going on at Black Force. So there's no way you're going to miss deadlines. You're going to say, I did not see that. If you've attended classes, you will see this announcement that your developer project 2 is due today. If you have filled the form, you wouldn't miss the work experience briefing that is happening tomorrow. And before you can attend class, you need to acknowledge that you've seen that. If you haven't acknowledged it, you will not be able to attend class. So what we're trying to do is just minimize the frictions. We're eliminating the need for operations to be doing manual stuff. Everything that needs to be done will be done automatically, so that when thousands come for training, we don't need to be hiring more people to be managing things that can be done with computer. And we want people to have a seamless experience of training. So not too much of emails and missing stuff. If you've attended classes, you will see your blackboard, you will see the announcements, and you cannot attend class until you've acknowledged the announcements. Then we know that we are closing all those issues of, I did not get this, I did not know this, and stuff like that. Okay? Please, we're not trying to make things harder. We're trying to make things much interesting and more technology driven, because that's the whole purpose of me even giving this training, because I want to use tech to solve problems that can be scaled, and this can be scaled. Okay? Thanks for your audience. Thanks for your attention. And I do hope you can learn one or two things from tonight. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care of yourself and have a good night. Bye, everyone. Bye.